I miss the old ways, but not like that. Dog whistling fool of a king. Don't you know that old Dixieland is more than dirt roads and simple ways? Tear it down that ragged cross of rain. I don't guess that we deserve all this, the beauty and the light, the way the firefly returns in June as dusk sings her lullaby. All the lives that fertilize manifested in human bondage that provides the bounty of this land. Tear it down, oh, tear it down that ragged cross of rain. Kid in old cinema, watching Gone with the Wind. Tradition runs the core of me, and a song of South whistling Dixie again.
Welcome! Thank you so much for coming to our monthly meeting. We're so glad you're here. Please make yourself comfortable. If you have any accessibility needs, like we are not talking loud enough, you can't hear us, or something else, let us know in the chat. We invite you to include your pronouns with your name so that that information is accessible to everyone. My name is Kat, and I use she or they pronouns, and I live here in Altadena in the Janes Village area, which is on ancestral, occupied, and unceded land of the Tongva people. Today, we're going to briefly introduce showing up for racial justice, as we do every meeting, have a quick grounding practice so we can be as present as possible with the reasons we're here today and the feelings and sensations that often come up in our bodies when we're talking about white supremacy and violence. Then we're going to talk about resisting white saviorism, Pasadena's officer-involved shooting policy, and have a little discussion. Just like we do every meeting, just going to go over what SURJ is. SURJ Altadena Pasadena educates and mobilizes white people in our community to end their support for racism and police violence. In partnership with BIPOC-led organizations, we take action for racial justice and support efforts to envision public safety without law enforcement intervention. We engage in this work with accountability to our community and our solidarity partners. And now we're going to open the floor to Stephanie. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie, and I use she, her pronouns. I live in the Farnsworth neighborhood in Altadena. Although today I am at my in-laws' house, and so I am on unceded Chumash land. So I want to invite everyone to think about being in connection and a time that you have felt connected to a person, to a group, to an animal, to the land, just some time where you have had a feeling of connection. And if it feels okay to close your eyes and transport yourself there, or maybe turn your gaze down and soften it if you don't want to close your eyes. And just take some breaths. Feel the air coming in your nose cooler, leaving your body warmer. And imagine yourself in that connection to that person, that group, animal, the land, whatever you've imagined. And just notice what it feels like in your body to be in connection with something. What happens to your breath when you feel connected? Notice how you feel in your shoulders, your hips. What's happening in your belly when you feel in connection with something? Your heart space. Really look around the scene that you're in and notice the energy that comes from your body and then back from whatever entity you're feeling connected to. Maybe even see if you can turn that feeling up a bit to really, really sink into it. Like putting that saturate filter on to your experience. And take another breath. See if there's anything else you notice. And now maybe just turn it down a little bit, that feeling. Maybe feel like you can kind of keep it in your background. And slowly return to our space here, knowing that you can keep that feeling of connection nearby as we talk about what it really means to be in solidarity with one another during our meeting today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm transitioning out of that beautiful space. Yeah, okay, so first of all, I just want to say hello to Andrew, who we haven't seen for a long time. Hi, it's really good to have you back. And hello to Dan and to Chris and to Sarah, who's eating noodles or something. Hello to Bonnie. So we wanted to talk about white saviorism because even though it's easy to, I think, all of us are really committed, who are here, committed to racial justice. And so it can be easy to think that we aren't engaging in some of the behaviors associated with white saviorism. And yet it's so insidious and so easy to slip into these kinds of ways of thinking and moving through the world. And we haven't talked about it yet in our chapter. So what is white saviorism? So the first characteristic is thinking of ourselves as helpers to Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. And, when you think about yourself as a helper, or when you say that you're helping someone, what that implies is that they're primarily responsible, that the job at hand is theirs to do, and you're an assistant, you're a helper. So sometimes I talk about this quite a bit in some of my teaching in feminist studies, because sometimes straight women will say, oh, I'm one of those lucky ones because my husband helps me with the kids, he helps me with the house. And it's such an interesting way of thinking about it, right? Because, those are his kids too. That's his house too. So it's not helping you. You're equally holding the responsibility of your children, of your house. And so similarly, we're not helping people of color end racism. We're equally holding the work of ending racism and white supremacy. And one could argue that we're even more holding the work, or should be holding the work as our responsibility, because we created white supremacy in the first place. So racism is not someone else's problem. It's not the problem. It's not the problem of BIPOC communities. It's our problem. And the second characteristic of white saviorism that I want to talk about is being in the movement for some of the wrong reasons. And I've listed some of them here. I'm sure you can think of others, and we'll move into discussion in a little bit, and you can all weigh in on this. But one wrong reason that we have encountered in this work is that white people might come into the movement believing that BIPOC communities don't have the resources or the discipline or the intelligence to lead the movement. And so they need white people to help them. Another is that white people might come into racial justice spaces to reinforce our self-image as good or needed or important people. And this kind of thing it's encouraged, it's sort of baked into a lot of institutional practices. So charitable organizations, the whole nice white lady, or the nice white teacher who's sort of rescuing kids of color, or there's a lot of this is in many ways the foundation of missionary work. It's often animating some of the logics, especially around adoption, but or cross-racial adoption, but especially in religious spaces. So this idea that that if we are part of racial justice movements, it validates that we are doing something. It could be that our ethical system is a secular one, but it could also be that our ethical system is a religious one. So it might even be reinforcing our self-image as godly, or following our spiritual commitments. Another example of being in the movement for the wrong reasons is to have an intense or transformative or otherwise big emotional experience. Sometimes white people can be especially white activists can be sort of like action junkies. I've seen some of this in anarchist spaces and in Black bloc spaces. And this is one place that I think the white anti-racist movement could really benefit from some feminist analysis, because sometimes white men in particular, but I think all white activists have the potential to make this kind of mistake, or I want to get in there, I want to tear down some shit, I want to break some shit, I want to start some trouble. And that there's a real high that comes from that, a real adrenaline rush that comes from that. But if you're making that decision on your own and you're not in consultation with BIPOC organizers around that, then you could actually be putting yourself, but also more importantly, people of color who are at that action or who are in that space at greater risk than if you had taken that action in the first place. Another wrong reason for being in the movement is to be in close proximity to difference, or to have access to cultures not our own. So, you know, one of the ironies of white supremacy is that it encourages white people to withhold their support for institutional equity and justice, but to consume Black and brown cultures, to love Black and brown culture, but not Black and brown people. And so often, you know, fashion, music, all of it, it's like much more interesting to consume the culture of the other than it is to do the slow and steady and often kind of embarrassing work of figuring out what is the culture of whiteness when we separate it out from white supremacy. You know, what are our traditional cultures and what would it look like to actually engage with those cultural projects? And so you might have noticed that at the beginning of our SURJ meetings, we always open with a song. And one of the things I do is look really long and hard to find anti-racist music by white artists so that we're not relying on Black artists all the time to deliver that anti-racist message to us. And if we can't find that music, that tells us something really important, right? Which is that we need to put more pressure on white artists to produce the music that we want to hear with the messages that we want to hear. And then third thing to say about white saviorism is that it often looks like dropping in to save the day. Sort of dipping in and out of racial justice spaces. So maybe jumping on board without context. So coming in and being really enthusiastic, wanting to get to work, but doing that without any history, without any lived experience, without knowing anything about what we're doing. And we feel like we can just get in there and start getting to work. And that when we're coming in uninformed, we're often coming at risk of making some pretty major mistakes. And it can also look like coming in without making a long-term commitment, without having any clarity about our personal stake. And so this means that as soon as it gets uncomfortable, or as soon as we get, as soon as we get called out because we've done something fucked up, we can be like, oh, well, I'm not being appreciated, or this is too hard, or, this wasn't all I thought it would be. And then we can just kind of bail out. Okay, next slide. So what are some of the effects of white saviorism? One is that it often causes more harm than good. It often puts at risk BIPOC communities. It often distracts from the work at hand. It often, when white people are engaged in white saviorism, this can require organizers, especially organizers of color, to stop what they're doing, attend to the problem, make sure that this person gets talking to, and this drains time and resources that we would rather be putting towards actually doing the work that's going to produce structural change. Another effect of white saviorism is that it's our engagement as white people isn't sustainable when we're engaged in white saviorism, because if we're in it for gratitude or to look good, to have our ego stroked, then the minute that those things aren't happening, we're gonna bail. And so in order to have the resilience that we need to stay in the work for a lifetime, which is what is required of us, which is what we owe to everyone else and to ourselves, then we need to have a lot of clarity about why we're doing this for everyone's freedom, including our own. Another effect of white saviorism is that it reinforces the view of BIPOC communities as needing us, needing our help. And again, I talked about this before, these stereotypes about how BIPOC communities are maybe disorganized or incapable or lacking agency or self-determination, and so white saviors need to come in and save the day. So those are things we don't want to do. What do we want to do? What we want to do is be accomplices. I'm going to skip to the third point here, or I'm going to start with the third point and then come back to the others, because the reason I love the word accomplice is that when you think about accomplices in like the way that term is used in the criminal legal system, accomplices are people who are guilty. They're equally guilty. They're sharing the guilt with you. So they helped you commit the so-called crime. And so to be an accomplice in racial justice work means that we're holding the risk and holding the responsibility equally. We're equally on the line. So we're not able to just dip in and out when it serves us, or, you know, bail when the going gets rough. It also means, back up to the top, being part of an organization with an accountability structure. So one of the ways I'm now pretty convinced that, like, solo activism is almost always white saviorism. It's so easy for it to kind of slide into that. And the reason that being part of a social justice organization is important is because that's where we can build in accountability structures. That's where we can make sure that we're working with a collective that's going to hold us to our own best vision and is going to help call us in when we're not acting in alignment with that vision. The other reason we want to be part of an organization with an accountability structure is because any white anti-racist collective that's worth anything has created systems of accountability with BIPOC organizations and BIPOC leaders. And so being an accomplice involves recognizing that it's those organizations, it's our partners, it's our BIPOC organizations and solidarity partners that know best what they need and what strategies and tactics to pursue. So we're always going to be asking ourselves, what needs have our partners expressed that they have? What kind of support have they asked of us? So rather than making assumptions about what we think they need, we're going to be always attentive to what we're actually hearing from them, and then furthermore attentive to what they think is a good role for white people to play. How would they like white people to be involved? So we have such a small group today that Kat and I were thinking we would just open up for some discussion about what this brings up for you. Any thoughts that you might have, if there's something that I didn't cover that you would add to a discussion about white saviorism, if you want to share some of the ways that you can feel the temptation to slip into some of these habits, if you have felt the shift in your own life from that kind of savior model to an accomplice model and what that's felt like, and maybe giving some credit to whoever helped move you there, any of that or anything else.
Hello, everyone. Where did that come from? Oh, go on, Heavenly. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that several people I see here definitely seems to operate outside of the saviorism and more in the space of accomplices. So it seems like it'll be a lot of testimonies here about what Jane is saying to share.
Andrew, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was actually going to say that I could probably take up the rest of the entire session talking about my own experience with this stuff. And actually a very specific situation that, yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. That's the thing. I feel like the solo activism thing is, you know, as the idea of not being linked up with organizations is something that rings very true to me, just in terms of my own personal tendency towards introversion and frankly being a bit of a hermit, that I haven't always kind of known how to access that kind of organizational, I suppose, context or kind of support. And so I think of the organization Black and Pink, who do letter writing campaign. It's not campaigns, it's essentially trying to match people up on the outside with people who are incarcerated, writing letters, essentially kind of moral support, that kind of thing, with an emphasis on LGBTQ incarcerated people. And I signed up for one of those things, and I kind of, it turned into something that was infinitely more complicated than I thought it was going to be, and really kind of, I feel like unmasked, not unmasked, but kind of revealed to me, I think, assumptions on my part that absolutely kind of chime with the things that you're talking about here. Just in terms of, to some extent, the self image as a good person, but also just kind of really underestimating. And to be fair, I'm not sure Black and Pink really kind of explained what to kind of expect, I think, from that situation. I think they were just like, oh, it's just about writing letters, when the reality became that the person that I was corresponding with, above all, needed money, and it turned into a kind of repeated. It turned into a relationship that was only based on kind of asking me for money. And the thing is, for me, that, I mean, it was a little bit of a shock, because I felt kind of stupid, I suppose, about it. So it was just like, well, of course, someone who's just been released from prison is going to need money and resources and things like this. And because I'd taken it on myself as an individual and wasn't really kind of affiliated with anyone else, there was no way for me to, to kind of prescribe parameters for the limits for kind of what the relationship should be, how much I should be kind of giving, you know, what was reasonable to be asked, what was reasonable to kind of assume on each side. And I think since then, I found myself thinking, you know, I think of friends outside in Pasadena, for instance, who work with people who are re-entering after being in prison. And I just think, oh, it's probably better for me to be affiliated and to work with people like that, who have decades of experience doing this and who would be able to kind of check me in terms of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I could talk about that whole Black and Pink situation for hours. It was an extreme, and it continues to be a very complicated situation. So. But the transformative experience thing as well, I think, you know, there are moments where I could feel that kind of disappointment, I suppose, in like, oh, it's not kind of going the way I thought it might go, you know, when I think often you're just kind of confronted with much harder realities than perhaps you kind of expect going into it. And I think it's the institutional context that would give you, frankly, more support in terms of trying to kind of figure out where you are in the process, you know, and whether you're actually kind of optimizing whatever good you're bringing to a situation.
I'll share. I know this is good for me to think about because I am noticing a lot of defensiveness as I read through the list, and on my part, like I felt myself tensing up and wanting to like defend myself, and really identifying with a lot of the items on the list, and not necessarily, I don't know that they were all necessarily why I started and why I got in, but some of them were, you know, unconsciously. I think there was a lot that I wanted by becoming involved in anti-racism work, that I didn't understand when I wanted to get in, that is more available to me to understand now after having been in it for a while. But also a lot of the things that were listed there ended up happening. So I did end up having a transformative emotional experience. I don't think I went looking for that. So I was sort of like, oh, is it bad that I had a transformational experience? I don't know that it was. So it's a lot to pick through. I wish I actually probably should have screenshotted it. I'm sure I can find this information again, but
We'll post the slides on the
Thank you.
website. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm so glad you raised that, Sarah, because it's like some of this stuff, like, do we have transformative relationships inside justice movements? Like, yes. And that's some of what's so beautiful about these communities that we're part of and the movements we're part of. And also, you know, in terms of like, in terms of the friends that I want to make, like what people do I want to hang out with? Well, I want to hang out with you all, you know, like, and so there is at some level me thinking like, this is who the good people are. And, but I guess the way I think about it is in terms of just the sustainability piece, which is like, we're not always going to be in the peak moment. It's not always going to be a transformative experience. Sometimes it's going to be a shitty experience, or sometimes it's going to be a boring experience, or whatever. It's going to be all the things. And so, if we're in it for one particular reason other than the long haul of ending white supremacy, and then we're not getting that desire met, then I guess it feels like there's a bit of a risk that we, you know, might withdraw. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because as I was putting these slides together, part of what was happening is I was like really paying attention to, I was doing some soul searching about what I notice in myself are some of the seductions or the things that I want. And so I'm just often spending a lot of time like trying to sink lower than that. You know, what's beneath that? Joelle, sorry.
It's fine. You know, I don't mind. Yeah, I always think it's such a thin line, isn't it, to, as a white person, to tread when you do any sort of voluntary work or any sort of not falling in this, oh, I'm so good, I am such a good person. You know, it really is, I don't know, it's hard. It's very hard. You know, the reason why you do it is because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, But then when someone pats you in the back, you're like, oh, that feels nice. And it's kind of like addictive, and it's horrible in a way, you know. And I feel like there's so much of this, especially in I don't know, my experience here in the States, you know, it's like everybody's expecting a thank you and everybody's expecting that kind of reward all the time. And it's not about just doing it because it's the right thing. It's not because of anything else. It's just the right thing to do. And it doesn't matter whether anyone is looking or not. It's the right thing to do, and you have to do it. I don't know if I'm, yeah, but this thing about the thank yous and I don't know, it's such a slippery slope of not just becoming, you know, complacent about and expecting those thank yous when they don't come. Yeah, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah.
Bonnie?
Yeah, I feel a little nervous talking because I feel like I'm still kind of new to the group. But Heavenly was direct messaging me, say you should talk, you should talk. So she was interested in my let me say her words, not mine. How you came into this space and the social justice, and I came into the space like I grew up in church, and so I came with that kind of white saviorism as like a missionary thing. Like missionaries were the people to admire because they were willing to give up so much to help others. And I grew up with you help people and that's the right thing to do. And I had to learn to, especially when it comes to the missionary work, how much of white saviorism is tied into that. And then even just how much of like being a part of a lot of white American Christian churches now, there's so many problematic things, and kind of in that process learning, I have been fortunate to be a part of organizations like Moms Demand Action and the Glendale YWCA, and Glendale and Pasadena YWCA at this point. But they have done a lot of that work in education and make sure that anyone who volunteers in those spaces learns what it's like to be aware of the white saviorism and what it looks like to be an ally versus being a helper, or what it looks like to support and be an accomplice. And so I've been very fortunate in that to learn and to try and just learn all I can. I also grew up in the South, and so I have like so much I know I need to learn still. And so just trying to keep listening, being willing to listen when I've been called out and I'm wrong, being willing to question my motives continually, because I know that white saviorism is in the back of my brain. And so to pay attention to, you know, if that's being called out, or even just question my own motives about that. But, you know, what Joelle said of it's the right thing to do, right? Like it would be so easy to step out, but I don't think, you know, there were parts of growing up that, you know, you do the right thing, whether it's easy or hard. And most of the time it's hard. And so being willing to be like, well, I'm going to get my hands dirty. And especially when it comes to doing the right thing, there's so much work to be done and not enough people doing it. Right. And so making sure that mindset doesn't slip into that white saviorism too is really important. I don't know how much more to say about that, but like, that's kind of where that's come from.
Thank you, Bonnie. And thank you, Joelle, for sharing too. Chris or Kate, somebody's hand is over there in your square.
That was my hand. Hi, I'm Chris.
One of our white hands.
Yeah, I was a little bit reluctant to share just because I mean, seeing those points, I mean, I recognize all of them coming up in myself at different times. And I'm not sure. I don't know if I have like specific anecdotes, or I don't know if I can connect them to specific things, but I just wanted to say that when they come up, as they tend to, I just I've noticed that it's good to remind myself that to not beat myself up about it, because this is sort of our programming. And just note, I'm just happy that if I notice them when they come up, I'm just happy that I noticed them, and just kind of trying to just be like, it's not about me, just, just let it go. I mean, recognizing it is all that matters, and then not doing it, and just sort of not like beating myself up about it when those things come up, because they all of them have, have come up at times, I have to admit. So that's all.
Thank you.
Can I just add, and I'm sorry I was late today, and I'll definitely go look at the slides, but this is sort of a side comment, but just a little bit responding to something that Joelle said and something you said, Jane, about the feeling of, aren't I good for doing this work? And then also the feeling about friends and who, being in the movement or doing this work. Like one thing I've been trying to kind of reflect on and challenge myself about is like having more conversations with my friends who aren't, or that I don't know of, as, that we haven't talked about this stuff a lot or explicitly. And I think I realized one thing that kind of stops me is not wanting to appear as though I am patting myself on the back for doing this work. Like, oh, I'm involved in this thing. I think that you would be interested in it too, but I feel like it's a lost opportunity for me not to have those conversations, because I'm worried about being perceived as presenting myself as a white savior, so it's sort of like overthinking in some way, but I don't know. I mean, that's something I recognized recently, and I'm realizing more in hearing this conversation. So grateful for that being brought up.
I think something that I notice myself do, or I notice other people do, and a story that like brings it all home is, this is years ago, like before the pandemic. I was in a collective anti-racist space, and people were going around introducing themselves, and the facilitator asked everyone to say, like, I think the question was something like, why are you here, or something along that line. And everyone proceeded to like enumerate their anti-racist resume, and I think that like that's a thing we've all done, right? Like everyone just went right. And I mean, I like leaning into like what's happening there, like that we're all trying to like prove it's okay that we're here, or like that we belong, or right, it's like feeding into creating a sense of belonging and shared purpose. But also, like you're saying, Kate, like there's some like self-congratulatory, even sometimes competitiveness, like that feeds into that space, and just like, or like the anxiety that comes up around like, well, do I fit here? How can I share that I fit here, or that I know enough to be in this space, or that I belong, or just all of that. And anyway, when we were all done, the facilitator's like, no one said they're here because they're connected to, like, that this means something to them, right? That like mom's babies are dying, and we think that that's wrong, right? And I kind of never forget that, because of course, like, yes, right, that's why I'm here. But like, that wasn't what anyone said. I don't know if that's incoherent, but that just, I carry that with me.
That made me think about a practice that they do in White People for Black Lives that we haven't done. I don't know. I didn't. Maybe it would be a valuable thing to do, but which is that they usually at the beginning of their meetings, I think maybe at the beginning of every meeting, do what Dahlia calls the down speech, which is to talk about how often in white anti-racist spaces there is kind of a hierarchy of like, am I more down than you, or you know, like, I've been in it for this many years, I've been to this many actions, I've got this much street cred, and how SURJ is very explicitly refusing that model because it's a very exclusionary way of approaching things, when in fact what we're trying to do is bring as many white people into the struggle as possible. And so it does, sometimes I just think like, wow, that's really a perfect illustration of how fucked up whiteness is. That we would create such a counterintuitive, contradictory system where we're trying to build a movement, but we're going to make everyone feel like shit who comes into the movement. So I'm so grateful for the like different culture of SURJ, and how it really invites us as white people to actually love other white people and to love them into this work, and to see all of our friends and family and other white people in our community as like potential recruits, basically.
And as you say that, I think that's helping me understand a little bit of my defensiveness and my tenderness, because it feels like dancing on the head of a pin, right? Like, we don't want to be white saviors and show up and think we can fix everything when we're actually causing more harm. But we also don't want to be stuck in perfectionistic petrification where we're not willing to make mistakes. We don't have communities and spaces to share our stories. When I used to lead meetings similar to this, I always wanted to cut off that, like, don't leave space for the resume, right? Like, don't leave space for people to tell their whole story. But I had to understand they've never told those stories before. We don't have the spaces for them. People don't want to hear them. So, and in what you said, we need to love other white people into this work. Like, I want to recognize the white saviorism and prevent it from harming the work we're trying to do, but I also don't want the perfectionism to shut people down at the same time. And I felt a little bit of like, oh, this feels so terrible. Which I think, it is good. We do need to question our motives. We do need to critically assess, is what I'm doing, am I doing this for the right reasons? Why am I here? Am I looking for the cookies? And also, on the other side is like where I'm trying to find this tiny narrow path. On the other side is white supremacy culture has programmed us to hate ourselves and to be super critical of ourselves. And I don't know, it's like finding a new path that feels very small. And to me, that echoes with some of the stories I've heard from Black, Indigenous people of color about like having to operate in a white supremacist world, that there's no room for error, that they can't go too far this way, but they can't go too far that way, and they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. So I think it's just pointing to me, I'm used, as a white person, my whiteness affords me the luxury of doing it however I kind of want to, and messing it up at who cares, at what cost, and this is very different.
I think that really is something that we have to name, like you are, Sarah, that like we're actually building white anti-racist culture. Like that is what we're doing. And actually, like that's such a big part of the solidarity in the movement, right? Is to actually give and build white anti-racist spaces and community.
Yeah, what you were saying, Sarah, really resonated with me. At that, the reverse of it, that perfectionism. I don't want to do harm. I don't want to come in and blow everything up, and having that anxiety and not having any like mentors or elders to reach out to and be like, how do I do this? Like, I'm grateful, so grateful for this space to learn and to be educated, because I don't have a lot of people that are white that I can be like, how do I do things in a way that doesn't cause harm, but also I'm being vulnerable and willing to, I am going to make mistakes, and I need to know that I'm going to be held accountable, and have other people be like, no, you got to listen, like there's that lack of mentorship and elders to guide us on that path too. And I appreciate you speaking on that, Sarah.
I think this is maybe my favorite conversation that we've had in almost 2 years of SURJ. It feels like I just love what you said, Sarah, and then how you followed that, Stephanie. It really does feel like we're trying to build something totally new, and that maybe part of what we're building is taking this thing that feels so narrow and tender and precarious and creating some expansiveness there so that we can hold those two pieces without it feeling so disorienting. That we're lovingly bringing white people in and holding ourselves in lovingly, and also naming what we do and don't want to do, who we do and don't want to be together, knowing that none of us are disposable and we'll make mistakes, and that will all, come together in some kind of loving package, and that it will humanize us and mean that we show up in multiracial spaces tender and loving and vulnerable, rather than all rough, in the way that white supremacy culture encourages us to be. So thank you. I love it. Love it.
And I think that is the key, isn't it? The willingness to learn, and the willingness to be vulnerable, and the willingness to hear and listen, really make mistakes. And as you said, like in white culture, when you make a mistake, it goes like this, and there is other ways of seeing that mistakes are actually opportunities in which people can grow, and we can all grow together, and we can all, but also being very careful and listening, because some of our mistakes could actually really, really harm someone. So yes, everything that you said before, of having a group, having a support, having a structure that actually helps you navigate, and yeah, I'm just so happy that I jumped into this conversation. Thank you.
Andrew, take it away.
I was thinking just in terms of the perfectionism thing. I mean, one of the central kind of issues I've had, and which many of you are kind of well aware of, is just I work a job that for very long periods of time feels like it's trying to murder me, and I don't have, perpetually exhausted, like I have no time. Sometimes I have no time for kind of anything else apart from that. And I realized, that part of the struggle with that is I feel a tremendous amount of guilt about like not being able to participate in a way that I want to with things like this and any number of other things in my life. And it's just helpful to know that you know, in terms of the group structure and being able to come back, I realize is the perfectionist part of me, of course, is just like, God, I don't want to waste people's time, and I don't want to create emotional labor for people by explaining to people kind of how hard my weekly kind of work life is. And so my tendency there is to just be like, okay, maybe I should just remove myself from this space. You know, it's just like, wouldn't it be more helpful if I just wasn't kind of encumbering people in that way? When the fact of the matter is, it's just like, well, it's better to plug in when you can, and to not, you know, I feel like beating myself up about that kind of stuff is truly an obstacle to kind of rekindling that participation. And that I'm just grateful for, I'm grateful for the structure of the group being as kind of fluid as it is in that respect. Because there are times when it's literally impossible for me to be able to kind of participate. There's no getting around that. And so, but I can feel that perfectionist kind of side of just like, well, it's got to be all or nothing. It's just like, well, that's just not true, is it? So.
I think that's the difference in like building deep instead of wide, right? Like, because I actually was so delighted to see you, Andrew. I thought about you yesterday when I was walking the dog, and I was like, where's Andrew? And so when you showed up, I was like, there's Andrew, right? And there was no like, where's Andrew? You know, it was more just sort of like, oh, like because we had connection, I was seeking that connection. And I think that's why I wanted to start our grounding there with like, what does it feel like to actually have a depth of connection with one another? That's a place that we build culture from, as opposed to any other thing, right? Which we know what that feels like inside. So.
Well, we have a presentation from Kat, who has some exciting news about what is going to happen finally at the Pasadena City Council meeting tomorrow.
You guys, I can't explain to you how excited I am for this moment. I'm thrilled. Okay, because I have been every week asking the city council to agendize this agenda item since October. So I'm real excited that it is happening. Oh, it's so good. It's just an informational item. So our next ask is to agendize an action items and actually do something, right? But the informational item is the same presentation, the exact same presentation that they gave in October. We have a video of the October presentation on our website. You can watch it if you want to review it. If you're like, ooh, I really want to know things in advance, you could see what's going to happen and then just get really worked up and engaged in what you want to say. But I also created 10 unique talking points for the 10 of us. If you want, you don't have to, but if you want, you can call in tomorrow with me and I'll be calling in. I'm going to talk on a non-agenda, just because if they haven't agendized the action item, I can talk about that in the non-agenda time. And then also during the agenda time about the policies. So if there are any volunteers, we'll ask after the fact, but I'd love to get some like, just, yeah, I want to do it. You know, yeah, I'll be there. I'll talk during this time. I'll talk during that time. So that we feel like we've planned, right? And then we all know who's doing what. so we can have a little, because you know they only give us 90 seconds now. I don't know if you've been on lately, but they reduced our time limit from 3 minutes to 90 seconds. And it gets kind of intense, like what you can say in 90 seconds, right? And so if we had like a little volley of people talking in a row, right, we could actually have a more coherent statement of facts, you know, like a better argument if we had a little grouping. Okay, so the officer involved shooting policy is on agenda item 9. So if you want to speak to it, it's item 9. If that, I'm guessing based on the agenda, I've been looking at it, I'm guessing that'll happen around 6:30, something like that. So there's usually the first 30 minutes, which are like the ceremonial matters, which they don't put on the agenda. So we don't know what they'll be until they're there, but they put them on. And then there's the non-agenda speaking I will be doing. You are so encouraged to do too. And that's usually around 4:45. And that usually takes 20 minutes. So at like 5, they start their consent agenda. That usually takes about 20 minutes because really they always approve it. There's never a time when they're like, no, down with you and your requests for money. They're always like, yes, okay, great. And so it doesn't take very long. And then the other 2 items are 8, which is an amendment to their action plan. I think that'll probably take 45 minutes or an hour. It's my guess. Who knows? Maybe it'll take 10 minutes. They'll be very happy to just approve it. But usually they like to chat. You know, they're like talkers, those people. And then there's 9. And then it's us. Oh, it's going to be so good, guys. Okay, so you can speak during the non-agenda item if you want. That'll be more around 4:45. Or during the agenda item, I'm guessing it's going to be around 6:30, but who knows? I can't promise you. But if you want me to text you, you can text me your phone number and I will put you on a little group text chain, and all of us who want to talk can be on there, and I can be like, you're on in 5, you know, and then you can just hop on for that part. You don't have to worry too much. Okay. I have a link to the officer involved shooting policy talking points I created. It's on our website. And if you go to, let me put it in the chat for you. There you go. You can click on the link and it's kind of on the bottom on the right, and it opens up a document. And maybe I will share a new screen so that we can do that together. Here. Okay. So here's the campaigns page. And if you go to the bottom, change in the OIS policy, and we click on that and we get to the talking points. And I've created 10 beautiful talking points for you. And so here they're all fleshed out, where you get to see all of the things. You could just read it, right? You could just read what's there. The only one that gets close to the 90 seconds is this number 7, which I did time and made it in 90 seconds talking at a normal speed, but it's just right there, right? So if you kind of like pause for dramatic effect, you won't make it, but it's still good. All right, so, okay, cool. I'm gonna go back to my other slides where I have highlights. Okay, so here are the highlights without all the words involved. Do you guys want like a brief overview of the officer involved shooting policy and why it matters? Yeah, okay. So here's what happens. An officer kills someone and then 2 things immediately start. One is a criminal investigation done by the police department, and the other is an administrative investigation done also by the police department, but by different people. So they're not the same people. And they all show up on the scene and they start, you know, investigating. But the administrative people, we found out at the October meeting, don't actually interview the officers unless they want to. It's not a very thorough investigation. They're not, no one's feeling confident in their investigative skills. So the city attorney was like, we recommend that you wait until the DA is finished with their criminal investigation or any civil litigation in which the officer is named personally has taken place before you wrap up your administrative investigation. Because like maybe you didn't do a good job. Like maybe they actually talked to the officer, but you didn't. And so you need that information before you can wrap up your things. Well, that would be cool, except that those things take years. So the criminal investigation gets put together by Pasadena, and then they send it to the DA. But maybe it takes them 8-9 months to do that, right? And then they send, or maybe even a full year. You know, sometimes they take a little while, right? They send it over to the DA. The DA's busy. He's got a lot going on, right? And so he's like, we're not the top priority. So it could take 2 years, 3 years before any criminal stuff gets sorted out. And so the administrative investigation doesn't actually begin. Like they don't actually do anything until 3 years later, or whenever it is that all of those things conclude. So you can imagine how great their investigation is, right? Like 3 years later, all of the details are just real crystal clear in everyone's minds at that point. You can go back and you can talk to those witnesses, but they don't even do that, right? They just review whatever was already investigated. And then they're like, cool, well, after I reviewed this stuff, the officers were fine. And so great. And that's basically how it works. And in fact, after the Kendrick McDade case, the LA Times ran a story that was like, they botched that investigation so hard. Because, and then an independent review of the case showed that the officers broke policy in several places, but that their administrative review kind of hid those details from the public so that they could be exonerated. In any case, we want the administrative review to conclude independently and thoroughly within 9 months. 9 months is the amount of time that the former chief of police, Perez, said was like the maximum amount of time it could take him to do an investigation thoroughly. Like, maybe we need to send something to get DNA tested and the labs are really backed up for 6 months. And so maybe it takes 9 months total. He was like, for sure, 9 months. That's how long it's the max it would take. And so we want a complete and thorough administrative review. We want them to have a mandatory officer interview. And that's actually what's like recommended by the police themselves. I wrote it down in another thing. The international, hold on, let me find it. There's like the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I read their report on officer-involved shooting policies and what they think should happen. Because I thought, at minimum, we should do what the police think is the best practice, right? That's the minimum, is we should be good at policing. Just the police should think that they're doing a good job. So that's the bare minimum. And we're not even doing that. So we should have a policy that helps guide them to have mandatory officer interviews. There should be clear disciplinary guidelines for when a policy is broken, what the mandatory consistent response to the breach in policy would be, so that the community is clear, right? The officers are clear in their minds. It's not just like on a case-by-case basis, which is how it currently is. Like, oh, that's my buddy. I don't want to get him in trouble. Like, he did it wrong, but that's okay. Cause you know, like we golf. So he doesn't need to have anything bad happen to him, right? So there needs to be a consistent mandatory response to breaches in policy. And that's currently not how it works. So we're asking for that. We're asking to review and improve policies after each incident. So let's say the officers all are acting within policy. They killed someone, but everyone thinks it falls within the policy. Well, then the policy sucks and we need to improve it, right? We need to make policies that keep people safe. So after an officer involved shooting, if the officer was like doing everything they could to be within policy and they still needed to kill someone, then we should probably review those policies to figure out how we could keep people safer. The attorney for the McLean family, Carrie Harper, has asked for these 4 changes in policy: stop handcuffing mortally wounded suspects, stop shooting fleeing people in the back, increase the retroactive recording time of body-worn cameras from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, stop pulling over motorists for minor infractions as a pretext for searching their vehicles. So those are all things that would have prevented Anthony McLean from being shot and killed. But shooting someone in the back while fleeing was exactly what they did to Kendrick McDade in 2008 or 12, whenever that was. Let me look. I've written it down. 2012. Because it was 8 years later that Anthony McLean was killed. The same way, like shot in the back while fleeing, right? So if the policy had been made after the Kendrick McDade case had closed, right? They were like, oh, we killed Kendrick McDade. It was in policy, but in the future, we should not shoot people in the back while they're running away, right? A new policy could have saved Anthony McLean's life. So we need to have a review and an improvement of policies after every officer involved shooting. Part of what the presentation is going to show tomorrow is that the council has really limited powers for what they can do. Like, they can't directly fire the officer involved, and they can't directly ask about administrative matters. Like, they can't direct administrative matters. They can do 2 things. They can inquire about administrative matters. So they can ask about officers. They can ask about policies. They can do all of that. They can ask questions. And then they can also instruct policy. So they can tell the city manager, we want to see policies that do this, but they can't do that themselves. They can't make the policy. They instruct the city manager to make the policy. So that's an important distinction. So when you're speaking, you don't want to say, you make the policy. You want to say, you should instruct the city manager to make the policy, which I know uses like 12 more words and like uses up some of your 90 seconds. But at the end of all of this, we don't want them to be like, oh, well, we're not allowed to make the policy, so right? We want it to be really clear that we get their limitations and we're still asking them for changes that they are legally allowed to do, right? So this is really important stuff. Does the Pasadena Police Department believe the officers in the McCain case broke department policies? We want to know, right? They should want to know that too. And if they did, where's the discipline, right? Like, what's going to happen? Did they tell the officer they did it wrong? Like, where's that? If they didn't, should those policies be changed? Probably so, right? Because we don't want people to keep being shot in the back. So these are really important questions to ask that they should be asking. And they're not clear based on them talking out loud in public session, they're not clear that they're allowed to ask these questions or what their role is. So it's really useful to ask for these things. We want transparent and open communication after any officer-involved shooting incident. So that would include having like a report out from the city manager to the council, explaining how the officer broke the policy, what the disciplinary actions were taken. They're totally not going to go for that, but we still want it. We want it. We want it to happen. And then the other one is we want them to release unedited video within 24 hours and leave that video up for the entire OIS investigation until it's complete. Because that means that you leave up that video for 3 years. You leave it up until the whole investigation is complete, right? Because currently they put it up on the website and then a week later they take it down. And so it was like, oh, you didn't get it? Oh, sorry. We met our requirement to post this to the public. Now you need to do a Freedom of Information request to get it. Oh, maybe I forgot to send you all of the things in the Freedom of Information request, right? So it's just way better if it gets to stay up the whole time. Beautiful. Okay, so those are the main talking points. I'm very excited about this. We know that Tyrone Hampton and Kennedy are going to be on board, but probably won't. Kennedy is not going to start it himself, right? He's not going to move for a motion. Maybe Tyrone Hampton, but he hasn't yet, so we don't know. We're trying. Bonnie's reaching out to Jess Rivas to see if we can get her on board. And then I heard from Sarah, who might try to talk to Jean Masuda. I think my intuition is that if there's a little consensus of 2 or 3 people already, Steve Madison will jump on board because he's just like, oh, you're doing it? I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. I think the person that is unmovable is actually the mayor. Like, I'm not convinced at all that he is an ally in any way. So that's where I think we're at with that. I would love it if anyone wants to pick one of these talking points that they want. Like, if you want to call it, you want to take number 1, it's yours, then it's yours, right? And we'll give it to you and it'll be so beautiful and no one else will do it. And it will just be yours. And we'll make sure to save it for you. So is there anyone who's willing to come?
I just have to say that I love you, Kat. Like, you're freaking amazing, first off. I had a lot of white teachers growing up, and I don't know why I did not have you. I'm like, oh, goodness. So I just really had to say that I'm already sharing this, what you put together, the outline, to everybody, because I understand that everybody's going to have their, on here, you said that each person gets to pick a point and it's just for you, but please share as well, because I am sharing it with other people. And
you should definitely share as many people, because like, imagine how powerful it would be if 20 people say number 1 and then 20 people say number 2 and then 15 people say number 3. I mean, there's no reason to not have more. We always want more.
So I want you to know, Kat, the response already is like, this outline is amazing. People are already texting me like, this is amazing. And I was like, Kat is just like that. That's just who she is. So thank you, Kat.
Yay. Okay. I'm seeing Sarah raise her hand. I'm seeing Chris. I'm seeing Joelle.
I have a question.
Bonnie.
I can't make it to the meeting on Monday night, and they used to, for meetings, you could write in a card and they would read it. Do they still do that?
They don't read the cards. You can write in and they'll put it in there. And
Okay.
the members are supposed to read them themselves.
Sure.
And they don't, but they're supposed
Yeah.
to. That's part of their job. So you can totally put one in.
I'm happy to give them more paperwork.
Yes, yes, do it. Do it
Okay.
definitely, for sure, 100%. Okay. Chris, Sarah, Joelle, Jane, Chris, Sarah, Joelle.
And I know for sure, Kat, that Victor will take one of these. I have something I want to say specifically to Victor Gordo, so I kind of got something written
You
up.
got, yeah, you have to. Yeah. You have to.
But I know Victor will definitely speak on one of these. Anyone specific that someone else doesn't take, let me know and we'll be sure.
Okay, well, let's just ask, do any of you have one that feels better to you? So the first one is 9-month time limit. And the second one is thorough investigations with officer interviews. Okay, Chris, you want number 1? I think that's beautiful. Number 1. And the third one is make inquiries into administrative matters. And the fourth one is transparent communication with disciplinary actions. Fifth one is transparent communication with video evidence. 6 is improve the OIS policy. Like, it's your job, do it, like that kind of thing. And 7 is how Kendrick McDade, Chris Ballou, and Anthony McLean, those things kind of go together, and why policy reviews should be automatic after an officer involved shooting.
What number is that? Because I think Victor would like to say that one.
7. You will have
Number
to
7.
talk quickly though. That's the one that is literally 90 seconds.
Oh, okay. Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take 7.
Okay, great. Joelle's gonna do 4. Victor is 7. Okay, and Jane's gonna do 6. Beautiful. And 8 is uniform time limit for all administrative reviews instead of the case. So this is responding directly to one of the slides in the policy presentation that's going to happen. So they're like, instead of making a uniform policy, make a case-by-case policy. And then that just means that they do the default, which is like indefinite. So they have in policy, like, you're supposed to get back to the officer within a year, but then if there's a criminal complaint or civil litigation, it can go on for as long as those things go on. And that's what happens every time. So we want to get rid of those caveats and be like, it's just 9 months. That's just how it is. There's no caveats involved. So that's what that is. 9 is a timely policy can save lives. So, and then 10 is officer involved policies are changes are needed. Sarah, you wrote, 9. Okay, great. 9, perfect. That's so wonderful. I'm so excited, guys. I'm so excited. Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Just to be sure I understand, Kat. So are we saying these during the public comment, or did you say this is during the agenda time? I just want to be sure, when are we trying to strategize these to be said in these numbers?
The order doesn't matter of them. Like, I listed them 1 through 10 just because it's easier to assign them to people, not because they need to be in an order. And so I think they should, like, I'm going to be speaking twice because I have time to speak twice. But if people are like, look, 4:30 does not fit in my schedule, but 6:30 does, then they should speak to the agenda item. Or if you're like, I definitely want to speak after the whole thing in non-agenda item, if there are more than 20 people signed up for the speaker cards and 20 people show up at the beginning, then the rest will get shifted to the end. And so
Mhm.
you could kind of think of it that way, right? So
Yeah, I understand that part. I was just wondering, Kat, do you think it'll be more effective that we all are speaking at the agenda item? Because a lot of this is focused in regards to the OIS.
all
But-
focused on it. Yes, it's true. It's true, it is. So I think either way is fine, but I didn't want anyone to not participate based on the time that it happens, right? And so whatever works in your schedule is great for us. But yeah, I
think I just
they'll-
asked
they'll
because
be-
I think I asked because I think I'm gonna focus on having people's really put in for the agenda item number 9, and I just wanted to see how you were thinking on that one as well. So yeah, okay, I get it. Thanks.
Perfect. I am so thrilled, guys. I'm beyond. It's so exciting. This is the best. If we can get one of those counselors to be like, you know what? I think we need an action item. It will be like winning the lottery. You guys, you will have sent me for a year trip around the world. I will be so thrilled. What? It's going to be amazing. I think it's possible. It could happen. Anything could happen. I'm really excited.
Can I end with just a couple of announcements? Okay, great. So I wanted to share a couple things. One is that I just agreed to join a 9-month project, I think it is, with White People for Black Lives. And it's basically a training. It's for experienced organizers, people who have done a couple of projects with SURJ already, and who want to go a little deeper. And it's going to be around fundraising, and they're calling it at this point, not the training, but the other piece, white money shit. So all of the stuff that comes up, the obstacles that come up, the psychological and emotional stuff that comes up around the redistribution of wealth. And so the first part is going to be a series of trainings that are going to be on Sundays in the morning, I think 11 to 12:30 for 4 training sessions. And then after that, we're going to get together in pods to apply what we learned to a fundraising project. And White People for Black Lives selected Eco Hoods, which is a community that's being built in South Central Los Angeles of tiny homes for unhoused folks. And so there'll be the tiny homes, but also the space is going to be a community space, a movement space. And so the project will, all of the fundraising that we do in the project will go towards that, but it will also be an opportunity for us to develop our fundraising skills. I'm really excited to do this because fundraising is something that fundraising in this way is something I don't have much experience with. I have like grant writing experience and stuff. So I'm putting this out here in case anyone else might be interested in this. Let me know if you are. It is a big time commitment, I know. And then not a big time commitment, but another thing that's on my radar and Kat's too, is that we want to get trained up on the ending police associations and learning more about police associations. And so White People for Black Lives has put together a whole training and a set of resources, a toolkit on this. And so Kat and I basically are going to go through all of that, and then at some point we'll bring it to our chapter. But if you want to be if you want to join us in going through all of those materials, let us know that. And then it looks like next month in February, our theme is going to be around children and racial justice. And Heavenly has introduced me to a very amazing collective called Reimagine Child Safety. And it looks like it's a collaboration of some folks with with Black Lives Matter. I almost said Black people for Black Lives. A collaboration of some folks from Black Lives Matter, and then other youth justice organizations, and then people who are doing work around reforming the foster care system. And we've talked about in our chapter that we have a remarkable number of a remarkably high number of foster homes and residential youth facilities in our area, Pasadena, Altadena, and mostly this system is filled with kids of color. And one of the things that many people who aren't interacting with the system don't know is that there's a lot of cooperation between these residential facilities and the foster care system and the police. And it's part of the way that the school to prison pipeline works, part of the way that these kids get put into the carceral, sort of out of the foster system into the carceral system. So anyways, Stephanie and I want to kind of start thinking about kids together. Everything from, thinking about schools to policing of young people across these institutional environments to parenting. And so we're going to be rolling out some of that, and it will pop up in our meetings around some of the poly-ed work that we do together. So if you're interested in kids and you want to be part of this thinking with us, let us know. And it looked like maybe Joelle raised a finger. Okay, great.
Jane, do you mind if I just add something to what you just said really quick about the Reimagine Child Safety? Yeah. And I don't know if I already sent you over like the demands that we're sending to the different supervisors, but I know we have a meeting set up with Supervisor Barger, with Judy Chu, and also Chris Holden. But we want to see if we can have our community neighbors like you all also send in these demands, saying that we align with these demands. So Jane, did I already send those demands to you or did they send them to you, Reimagine Child Safety?
Yes, if they're the same thing that I'm thinking of, because when I said that I wanted to sign on, and she said, well, we want you to take a look at the demands and see how you feel about them. And then I wrote back and said, these are amazing. Yes, sign our SURJ chapter on, but I didn't hear back. So I actually don't know what happened there, but I did get to review those. It was like kind of the platform of Reimagine Child Safety.
Okay, I'll just send you just to be sure what we sent to Judy, to the different dignitaries, so to speak. Okay. And see if you can share with our SURJ family and see if they are open to also writing letters saying that we are in agreement with these demands. And also, I just want to say happy anniversary, Jane and Kat.
Thank you. Thank you. We're gonna eat dinner together on Zoom because we're in 2 different places.
Before we go, I just wanted to shout out the community care that we did, and I was hoping to get Andrew to still stay here before he left, but he left. So anyway, he helped make the video for the Jamal Patterson family fundraising that we did, and I have a link to that on the meeting link there. So if you haven't donated yet, but you still want to, then community care could go from you to the Patterson family, and I'm sure they would really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to those of you who donated. A lot of people donated, and we were able to raise the funds for Kyra's deposit, right, on her apartment. Heavenly, was that she?
Yeah, I know her security deposit has been covered, I just want to add something else real quick. Thank you all so much. She just gave me a call yesterday. There was a lady, her name is Dr. Andrea Davis, who agreed to give her parent treatment for children with autism and also help her children for free, something that's usually like really expensive. So I just love our community that really loves supporting and helping other people, and especially helping BIPOC people. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Heavenly. Yeah, we met our goal there, and there's still more need. I had set that at a kind of modest goal. I probably should have made it higher given how much need Kyra and the kids have right now. So if you haven't donated, please know that she can use more support for sure. All right. It was so wonderful to see all of you. Thank you for yet another incredible conversation. I just always feel so uplifted by getting to be with you all.
Can I ask a very quick question?
Yes.
Does Heavenly, if this for you and for anyone else who might know, is there an article that really speaks to all the different work that you and My Tribe Rise are doing? Because I found a few articles, but I feel like they don't include a lot of the work that I know that you do. And I want to share with my students.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Sarah, for what you shared with me about the curriculum. I really like the one by Pasadena Weekly. And then there was one by, it's another smaller paper that was really good. Give me a moment, and I'll try and see if I can get some information to you over to you by tomorrow.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Heavenly, is your website another resource that might be useful?
Yeah, but what I realize is that a lot of our articles are not on our website. I was just telling Victor that I'm like, the articles, things that have been written about us, things that we've taken time to, really share about who we are and what we do, are not connected to our website. So we need to work on that. But I will get you what we have. Thanks.
Thank you, Heavenly.
All right. Have a great, what time is it? Afternoon.
Afternoon.
Yeah. And we will hear some of your voices tomorrow. You will for sure hear ours. And for folks who aren't on tomorrow at the City Council meeting, we will see you in a month.
Chris or Sarah, if you want me to text you, you can send me your phone number in the chat just privately.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. And then let me know if you want to speak to an agenda item or to non-agenda so that I know when to let you know.
I'm going to put your number into the chat, honey, too. So so people, because another way to do it would be to text Kat now, and then she'll have you. Kat stays on the meeting the entire time, which is really great because it can be like 5 or 6 hours. And so if you can't be sitting there for 5 or 6 hours, you can have Kat promise to text you when it's coming up time to speak. And that's just such a beautiful service.
Yeah, they give you like, we're going to call this person and then this person will be next. And so I'll text you then. And that's like, it's like a 30-second or like a 90-second window of time right before. So just so you know, that's kind of how it works. All right, cool. I hope you have a beautiful day, guys. Bye, everybody.